Okay?
Yes, we can see it. Great.
All right. Okay. So basically, I will be presenting a topic which is very close to my heart. I'm also currently a PhD student, and I'm doing research about this as well. So this is going to be also feedback from your end, which I would appreciate. Obviously, it's the retention strategies for the employment of persons with disability within our communities. It is a very dynamic subject. Obviously, we will see later on that COVID changed a lot of things in the disability sector. So we can start with obviously my first slide. This is something at my heart. It is a very personal quote that I got from Stephen Hawking. Obviously, I know a lot of you know Stephen Hawking. So work gives you meaning and purpose, and life is empty without it. We all know that definitely that work can give us quite a satisfaction in our life. Unfortunately, not everybody has the opportunity for 1001 reasons to be employed. The focus is always on young people and disability. So this conference focus also on the WHO sustainable goals, and obviously with a group of 17 sustainable goals. One that is very much to my heart is goal number 8. And that's, as you can see on the screen, promotes the achievement of full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities by 2030, which I think that's a very strong target across the world. Obviously, now I think that COVID maybe would have prolong a little bit that target. However, when I have this sort of summary of goal number 8, and when I saw it the first time, I always said there is one word missing, which for me it's extremely important, and I would have added the word paid. So promotes the achievement on full, paid and productive employment, and I think this is very. I think this is a very thing that we need to consider when we are supporting young people with disability at the place of work. You know, and there's a reason about that. We will maybe speak about it later on. So the role of employment in people's life, especially in our communities, which is the main focus on this conference. So we can see this topic from a general sociological side. So in our communities, however, we always must combine this with something that obviously they are there for obvious reasons, which are social policy side, you know, the laws, the policies, the any documentation that can support this. However, for this reason, for this conference, we will see it from the general sociological side of it. So I've put here an introduction of what is the sociological perspective. So mainly this focus on the human behavior in a social context. So in this case, the human behavior of people of people with disability being employed in our society. However, as we all know, there are social factors that influence each and everyone in our society, hence also influence the way people with disability are being employed, and of how they are being employed, how they are being supported to go into employment. So mainly we will be seeing the move away from the medical model, which you all know, to the social model, thus involving the community more to place persons with disability in employment. So let's take a look about the general sociological perspective. However, before I start that, at the beginning I said I would have always add the word paid employment, and this is something which, especially in our country, I see it in our island, and maybe also from the research that I'm doing across the continent of Europe. I am not sure if this is also a shore of Europe. I took this quote from our Commissioner for the Rights of Persons with Disability here in Malta. So when she was put in her role, she said we cannot have a cycle where people with a disability repeatedly involve themselves in programs and projects but never find work. So this is something that we really stress. We cannot have these people put in projects, again in projects, again in projects. All they want, these people, is that at one point they are placed into paid employment. Like we get the salary at the end of the month, like everybody else. So they need to have this also in their life cycle. However, here on our island, we experience people going from one project to another, and this is where I think our community can support this and finally let these people going into work employment. So when you have young people, it's here in Malta, compulsory education is till the age of 16. So what happens after 16? So they have a choice. Some of them, they are already job seekers. Maybe they have all the skills. They have, acquired a good background. Their disability is that they can move on to employment. So they go on a process and start looking for work. However, there are cohorts of young people that they still would need some training, maybe of missing skills, etc. But in the long run, they will eventually be job seekers, as the orange box that we see. There are those young people here locally. I would say they are very in the minority, that they continue further their studies into secondary and tertiary education. So these are the three ways once they have finished compulsory education, and we have here in Malta full integration of education system. However, once they finish at the age of 16, there is a little bit of a shock, so what's next? So this is the way forward. So I just want to give a brief description also on what type of employment there is. As in, once you are a job seeker, you can always opt for some support, or maybe some help through coaching, etc. So we can see that in the disability sector, there are three types of employment that I can see that a young person can move. There is the sheltered employment, there is the supported employment, and then there is the mainstream employment. So These are the three paths that a person, once he is registered as a job seeker within our system, they can go through. Um, you're seeing the arrows at the end, at the bottom, because they can be a follow-up moving from the shelter to the supported and to the mainstream. However, there are, as I think most of us, there are some cases when a person can enter supported employment and then move into mainstream, or they can move into mainstream directly. So it's not a one system that fits all. You know, we need to focus on a person-centered approach and see where the person is at that stage of once they make themselves known to be job seekers. With regards to sheltered employment, here locally, and I know that in Europe there are a lot of pros and cons about sheltered employment, that they are not inclusive. However, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion from my current research and from my experience, yes, we need also sheltered employment, and because there are people that, although they are not ready, they can start from sheltered employment and then move on to, for example, supported employment. Or there are cases where they can move also from the mainstream. However, there's also a little bit of a hybrid between the sheltered employment and the supported employment. And as you can see in the bottom of this slide, there are cases where large companies, they take persons with disability on their place of work. However, they will be in a sheltered workshop. Is this inclusive? Is this not? This is debate that goes on for years and years. I'm not against or pro. However, I think that there is a scope for sheltered employment. Even some many or there's a cohort of group that they say that this is not inclusive. Moving on from the shelter, there is the supported employment, which I think this is, in my opinion, the most inclusive employment stages that a person can then enter into employment, being fully paid, etc. There's a 5 process that can be done. Obviously, the main focus when there is this process, I would say, is stage number 5, where there is the on and off support. That's why it is called support employment. So the person once in employment, both before, during the process, and when he is employed, there is still some form of a support. It can be through job coaching, it can be through visits by a job coach, it can be just a telephone call, a buddy system on the place of work. But obviously, this is a more inclusive type of employment. The third one is when you have persons with disability who can make it into mainstream employment, and they are fully integrated without any support. We have great success here about that as well. Obviously, it depends always on the impairment of the person. I hope I'm not running fast or speaking fast. So if there are any feedback from your side, if I can slow down. But I know that time is maybe against us. We need to instill the culture of the ability factor rather than the disability. We need to, obviously, even us as community workers, as people living in a community, as persons, support the community, especially this vulnerable group of persons with disability. We need to focus mainly on the ability rather than the disability. This will also start with a positive mindset for supporting this. Obviously, our role is that we that we educate, that we obviously share this concept of the ability factor, promoting more the abilities of the person rather than the disabilities. Unfortunately, even for me, for example, I started my research about persons with disability before COVID. So even if I put on a proposal of for my research, I think COVID has changed a lot of things, including the way persons with disability now are being maybe treated on the place of work, maybe seen the effects of COVID. So I think COVID has changed a lot the course of how persons with disability are seen at the place of work. Obviously, it depends also on the culture of the country. So we see that there are countries like in our country, we are now fully back to work. However, the repercussions of the persons with disability that stayed at home because of COVID, they are finding it very difficult now to reintegrate work, reintegrate back into our communities. The focus on this topic is the community engagement. What are our duties as community workers, community support people coming from various sectors, psychologists, psychotherapists, youth workers, social workers, etc. So within the community engagement, it's supported by a variety of service systems. So we are all a part of these service systems, and we provide various types of services. Obviously, it is our role that we enable the individuals to expand their skills and their experience, so that they may secure high quality and professional satisfying careers and jobs and the benefits of employment. So within our community, we need to be very proactive on what we are going to do. Yes, we can do projects. I do support projects. However, projects are not the end. A project should have a start and end, but then it should also have a continuation. What are we going to do after we have finished the project? We see a lot of projects in our communities, but we need to take them further. We need to engage ourselves, so we need to get persons with disability to engage more into our community. And obviously this needs to be chosen by the individual, which type of activities the person would like. Is it sports? Is it maybe a work experience, maybe joining another voluntary organizations? Through this time within the community, maybe before they are looking for work, or even while they are working, they are acquiring the soft skills that mainly they are not taught at the place of work. They expand their employability skills, their social interaction if they're living alone. Being part of a sports club, a volunteer organization, or another group within our community. So we can provide a sense of purpose and belonging within our circle of community. Obviously, it's building relationships and social network. So basically, this create opportunities for individuals to connect, to make connections. Obviously, COVID has put us a challenge, especially into the mental health sector. So it is the community that can give the first interaction of supporting these people into our communities. However, this will always enhance that when they go at the work of place, they are always more job ready. job ready, not in the skills maybe, but they can still acquire skills, but also in their social background. So there can be also the opportunity that within the community there are people who can be mentors for these persons, on a voluntary basis, and support them more into the integration at the place of work. And mainly it's not to lose their job. So even after they are employed, we need to support them to maintain this employment. Obviously, for the new job seekers that we're supporting in our community, the community may be the primary source of non-advertised jobs. Maybe there are jobs that are being advertised. Okay, yes, in the newspaper. However, by the word of mouth within our community, we can see that there could be job opportunities for these persons. The community can also serve to sharpen workplace and social skills. So even once they are employed, if they are involved into extracurriculum activities, we are always enhancing their presence at the place of work, providing them with job skills, with other activities, maybe more integration of how they can integrate more at the work of place with different age groups, etc. Okay, I can go to the, I think I have about 2 slides or a little bit more. Obviously, there are strategies that supports persons with disability, like wage subsidy scheme that we support the employment. I need to run a bit this. Okay. There are the quota systems that we know that can support also the integration of persons with disability. These are why persons with disability leave the place of work. So where our job can come in within our community, medical reasons, not enough reasonable accommodation, lack of family support that maybe we can give. And these are some maybe focusing on how we can secure job as community, and focus on what is listed here. The body system that we can put at the disposal for this place of work, etc. One last thing is this scenario. I think we need to see more of job clubs in our community. So this is where we can come in and help persons with disability to make it and maintain at the place of work. If we can create projects that can support persons with disability before and after being employed, this is the place where the community can come in. The projects that we can make with presenting jobs clubs within our community. I think I finished, Anastasia. I'm not sure if I have gone over, but I think those are my details. If anyone, I am sure that they will be shared. Apologies for getting fast, but 15 minutes or so.
Thank you very much, Tonio. So great experience, so huge experience, and so detailed presentation. Thank you so much. I apologize that we have so limited time.
I know.
Yeah, but we will have 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, for online practice exchange. We will have free Zoom accounts and we will have free channels on Discord. So we will invite everybody to join us. And there we have no limits for time to discuss different topics, different directions and different themes in terms of community development. So we will have time to tell more about what we are doing now. Thank you very much. So Brand, what about you? Are you ready to share your experience with us?
Sure. Okay, let me just go ahead and share my screen here.
Yeah, please do. You're welcome.
Please let me know when you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need to click the button. It's the same mistake I made last time.
Okay. Oh, now we can see your slides. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, great. Cool, thank you. My name is Dr. Brent Downs. I work currently as the manager of Place in the Shire of East Pilbara in northwestern Australia, and I'm very privileged to be able to speak with you all today. I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I live and work on, and the traditional owners of all the lands across the world, and to those diverse communities who call them home. I acknowledge and pay respects to our elders, past, present, and emerging, as the keepers of our collective stories. And I extend my respect to all of you and your families from my family and I. So the Pilbara, it's kind of difficult to pronounce, the Pilbara, is situated in Australia's remote northwest. So the Shire of East Pilbara, which I work for, is one of the largest and most remote local government areas in the world. So the geographical area of the local government region is extremely massive and extremely remote. There are only 3 very small towns in the Pilbara, in the Shire, which are Newman, Nullagine and Marble Bar. And they are separated by a really, really vast distance. So for me to drive from where I live, which is in Marble Bar, to one of the other towns takes over 2 hours. If I want to drive from where I live in Marble Bar to Newman, it takes 5 hours. So, and the terrain is very, very rugged. It's a desert, and there's a lack of road access. So it's an extremely large and extremely remote region in northwestern Australia. So place-based development has become something of a hot topic in recent years, in Australia particularly, but in other places around the world as well. And there's a lot of organisations sort of over the past 3 or 4 years in Australia that have been really interested in notions of place, which is emerging from various literature and also from the outcome of government reports, including specifically there are a few different royal commissions that were into very sort of significant issues in our human community services sector that all sort of have come out and said place-based services are what we need. But when they did that, they didn't exactly define what place-based services were. So the literature in the government policy seems to be very much about a reaction to deficit-based services of the past. But there's no real consensus as to what place-based services are. We're getting closer. And I think there's the notion right now, we have a saying in Australia and maybe in other places in the world that in terms of human services, we tend to locate the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, which is a very useless place for the ambulance to be because the person has to have already fallen off the cliff for the ambulance to be there. So it's kind of a metaphor for how we approach community services and human services in an Australian context and also in lots of places around the world. There's this notion that I think we're starting to get to of that it's actually more useful to not have the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, get the ambulance away from there. And we want to move to more capacity building, holistic, person-centered and place-based services and community development models. From my point of view, and I think from many of our point of views, this isn't really a new thing. the interest in it might be new, and the sort of rhetoric and language around it might be new, but in and of itself, this concept around place being at the center of how we organize and how we understand communities is not new. In fact, it's very, very old, and it harkens back to a grassroots style of community development, which has been operating in Australia at least for decades. This is one that has local government at the centre, and I'll explain why. So in Australia, we have 3 tiers of government. We have the federal government, we have the state government, we have local governments. Local governments in Australia are the most visible and accessible level of government, which most Australians access and see. So it's the most familiar and close sort of form of government to them. They're responsible for a broad array of local issues, infrastructure and community needs, and they're positioned to respond locally to local issues. All local governments in Australia are inherently place-based, as they exist by, of, and from the places and communities that they represent. So this notion of place being important in the community's development and in community services inherently ties into sort of a place-based identity of how local governments are, I guess, philosophically designed to operate, which is to be a kind of service that exists that is representative of local people in local places, about local issues and local things. So it's fairly place-based. And really, this is the way that things have been operating for a long time. We're just getting better at understanding it and capitalising on it. So local governments, like the one I work for, which is the Shire of East Pilbara, operate to mobilise local resources and people, and can be positioned as sector leaders, in that we provide the catalyst for place-based community to take place. So what that means is that we kind of have the ability to start things, to build momentum, because we have this agenda of, well, we are by and of and from these places. We have this localized agenda. We're not necessarily interested, in anything else other than activating local people and local communities. Therefore, we can act as a catalyst. We can have, I guess, good ideas and then, sort of source them out to different sorts of people. We can also act as a backbone. And it's interesting to think about this function from a local government perspective around a backbone function and how we can sort of provide support to community endeavour. A lot of people in remote, regional and rural communities like the one I live and work in really want stuff to happen. They just lack any way for it to happen. So we can essentially provide spaces, places, abilities for things to take place, where the community can actually be activated, and all they're doing is they're using, our asset, which is definitely a better form of community development. So we have 2 challenges in the Pilbara, and that they're connected. We have a lack of service providers. So there's not a huge presence of different sorts of non-for-profit service providers. And in Australia, service providers are very constrained by their funding environment. So they're generally funded to do specific things, and they don't have any money to go outside of that. But this creates for us, I guess, and for me, really interesting and innovative opportunities of like how we can position ourselves. So one thing we can do is start something. Like I said earlier, we can act as like a catalyst. We can decide, okay, we want to do this, and we don't necessarily need to bother anybody else with it. We've got our own resources that we can go ahead and make things happen. We can also act as an enabler. So people can come to us with an idea and say, actually, we've got a really good idea for something that we want to see happen in our community, in our place. Would you support it? Which is great, because then we don't have to have the idea. And people can come to us, and all we do is go, that's a great idea. What do you need to have that? Do you want access to a facility? Do you want access to funding? Do you want access to just knowledge? Do you want access to, help fill out a permit form? Whatever it is. Okay. The other thing is to support So that's where programs can already be running, or initiatives are already running in the community. And we can essentially, make them, extend them, turn them into more than what they are, make them sustainable, pick up some of the load so that we take the load off people's shoulders in the community. Because we have such a low population and such a transient population that people get burnt out, and individual people can pick up a lot. And so if we can support people, then we make it more sustainable. We can also gap fill. So that means that where other services stop, we can, because we have a mandate which is essentially, respond to local things, local people, local needs. We can sort of gap fill where other services finish. We can sort of pick up bits and pieces of things that they're not able to do, or things that they're not able to completely do. So one of the biggest learnings is keeping it simple. In remote communities like this, the needs are very basic, and what our job essentially is making things simple happen consistently. So making basic things happen consistently. We're not practicing any kind of rocket science award-winning development out here. It's activating very small remote communities to be able to have basic kind of community development experiences on a consistent basis, the key thing being consistent. It's really common that people come into these towns with all sorts of ideas and all sorts of drive, and they start stuff, but then they get disenfranchised with the remote nature of living out here, and they leave, and so things sort of stop and start. So there's an absence of ongoing and consistent basic sorts of things in which the community can rely on. So these are really, really, really basic sorts of things like, access to libraries, access to community infrastructure that's not closed all the time because we can't find anyone to work there. Access to opportunities to come together and be together in the community, opportunities to do arts and culture, opportunities to do entrepreneurship and encourage local business. There are a lot of cases where there are good ideas that have started and then have fallen by the wayside. Our job, I think, is to do a consistent body of simple things, of basic things. So when it comes to increasing entrepreneurship, increasing tourism into the region, establishing forums where we can collaborate and put together a calendar of events during the tourist season. Tourism is one of the main drivers in our region. So getting people to come in is a thing that we want to do. And how do we capitalize on that? How do we make sure we're sharing resources is something that we're doing. We do a lot of work with children and young people in the community. We have a high amount of children that come from very, very impoverished regional backgrounds. And we're essentially trying to keep them out of the justice system. Okay, these kids are on a trajectory where a lot of them could end up getting in trouble with the police later in life. We want to sort of stop that from happening. So we're starting with really, really young kids, and we're collaborating with local police in building relationships. We help kids to be informed about rights and responsibilities in the community and sort of good citizenship building from really early on. So it's just simple, basic things. We have a lot of challenges. So mainly post-COVID-19, Australia is still reeling from ongoing economic impact. It's created instability in job markets, housing, and cost of living. This is particularly a big problem in the Pilbara because our main economic drivers are tourism, which is seasonal, and mining, which is transitory in nature. So mining companies will come in, they'll extract resources, they'll leave. They don't embed long-term roots into the community. So it's an extremely difficult time, even still now, where things are relatively normalised in Australia, to get back to stable. because there's instability all over the place post-COVID-19. And because what we're essentially trying to do is create a sense of stability and a sense of consistency, that this is the opposite of what we want right now. Local governments cannot operate in the same way as charities, and we actually run as a business. So local governments run as a business, which can make collaboration difficult. So there's a lot of work that we have to do in understanding that, helping the community and other stakeholders understand our role, which is to support and enable. We can't pay for everything. We don't have unlimited resources. And we can't run as a charity, so we can't just give out free stuff. We want some sort of return on investment, even if that's social return. We don't have to make a profit. We're not a profit-making business, but we still have kind of this business mentality. And we definitely have to be very, very careful in how we collaborate. And grassroots organisations can find this very, very tiresome. But there's a lot of work that we have to do in relationship building. The remote landscape of the Pilbara and the lack of infrastructure stretches even well-resourced organisations to the logistical limits. So there's just the inherent geographical challenges of the community make life just difficult in everyday kind of ways. So, for example, the town I live in, there's no doctor here. The doctor only comes in once a week, and they get here by plane. Who picks them up? Me. Where's the airfield? 45 minutes in the desert that way. So there's just an inherent difficulty of life in these remote landscapes, and they push our resources to the absolute limit. What we have found is that the nature of where we are and of what we are is that place-based approaches are not new. They do work for us, and they are essentially a very simple form of community development. I keep telling people I sound really silly a lot of the time because I purport to be a highly educated community development practitioner, and I'm doing extremely basic forms of community building. So I'm trying to get consistent events running. I'm trying to have facilities and services consistently operating. It took me a while to understand that for what it is, which is extremely powerful. It's not the most interesting and exciting thing, but these are real and legitimate needs that exist in these communities. People want to be able to go to a library. They want to be able to go to the pool. They want to be able to get the doctor to see the doctor. These are really important life issues for these communities that have to come to exist some way. So no, we're not going to do any award-winning work. We're doing this incredibly important, basic, consistent work, which is rooted in place. So it's responding to what people need in their place. It's not trying to change the reality of the environment. It's trying to work with people in the environment to make life as easy as possible and playing different roles, whether that be initiating something, whether that be supporting other good ideas, whether it be bolstering up and taking some of the load off the community where we can, or whether it is just trying to fill gaps as much as we can. That is pretty much it. Thank you very, very much for your time. It is a really wonderful privilege to get to speak to you. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brand. Great presentation, great experience. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Okay, now the last but not least, as I see, the third presentation is from Kenya. Elizabeth from Kenya, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you.
Okay, can you switch on your camera, please?
Yes.
Nice to meet
Hello.
you. Nice to meet you. Okay. Do you prefer to share your screen, or would you like us to share your slides?
Let me share my screen.
Yeah, please do it.
Oh, sorry.
And please, can you start just a few words of welcome and a short introduction, because we had this before we start our session. So please, just a few words about you and your background, and then you can start. Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was not able to join you. I was in another session by mistake. My name is Elizabeth Katuba, and I am a development practitioner, social activist, working for a non-profit development organization called Site Enterprise Promotion, based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'm delighted today to take you through this presentation titled Mainstreaming Inclusion of Persons with Disability, where we'll be looking at lessons and our experiences in Meru County in the Central Province. The experiences we share today are based on work, a project we developed with these partners, which was co-funded by the European Union. And why disability mainstreaming? We need to appreciate, and we all appreciate, that persons with disability experience numerous environmental and societal barriers that prevent them from enjoying their rights and freedoms on equal basis. And so to address this situation, SITE and the partners came up with a project which was implementing the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability in Uganda and Kenya. And we focused on 2 articles of the convention. Article 6, which recognizes that women and girls face multiple discrimination. And Article 27, which is right to work and employment of persons with disability without discrimination. And in Kenya, we worked in 2 counties, but we'll be focusing more on a strategy that had significant results in Meru County. So for the benefit of those who are not in the disabilities sector, let me just very briefly introduce the United Nations Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability. It's an international law which came in place in 2006, and it's a human rights instrument that then enables organizations of persons with disabilities, civil society organizations, rights organizations to advocate for the rights of persons with disability using the rights-based approach. And that is what we used in our project. And I think I've done that slide. And in able to address the challenges which you spoke about here, the different barriers, we examined in Kenya the kind of gaps that were making it very difficult for persons with disabilities to really attain their rights. And what we found out is we prioritized these 5 gaps. And generally, there was a lack of understanding and appreciation of the CRPD and rights awareness. Was very poor representation of PWDs because of very fragmented organizations and multiple representations of one disability, excluding many other disability types. This created tension, and thus very poor connection between organizations of persons with disability with their duty bearers. And as a result, it was very difficult to collect data, which then would provide the county government the information required to plan and budget. And there was also lack of synergy between duty bearers and different disability actors. So to address those prioritized gaps, we had joint discussions and a lot of work around with the Meru County government, particularly the Department of Social Development, Gender and Social Development, where PWDs issues are domiciled, and the PWDs themselves. The concern for the county was how it would be possible to ensure that so many persons with disability access services and reduce multiplication of effort by different actors. And for the PWDs, they wanted a space to express themselves and participate meaningfully. And therefore, but for us, the organization were looking for, the project was looking for a more sustainable way, a system that is embedded in the local administrative units to ensure there's disability mainstreaming across all public offices, and at the same time, it will live beyond the project. And because the administrative levels of the county government are already established, we conducted, together with the PWDs, an election of disability champions who would represent their interests, and these were elected from the grassroots level. And we did several validation meetings and came up with what we are calling the Meru County coordination, PWD coordination structure. This structure was in response to the gaps we identified, the barriers and also the gaps, these gaps we identified, and also appreciation that Meru County is the second county out of 47 that has the largest number of persons with disability. And there was need for the county government to ensure their services are reaching all these people. It adopts a bottom-up approach. On the one side, the PWDs are organized in organizations of persons with disabilities at the grassroots levels, who are represented by group leaders. They articulate their issues, which are linked to the county ward level by elected disability champions, 45 of them, representing the 45 wards in the county. These ones work with the duty bearers in the relevant offices to lobby for services, and the issues of the PWDs and their needs are articulated further to the sub-county level, the 11 sub-counties in Meru County, and they're represented by 11 coordinators who are PWDs champions, elected by the people. So they work across with the duty bearers, demanding for service, lobbying for rights, and they escalate the issues of PWDs further to the Meru PWD board. This board is the advisory role to the executive, and the executive deal very directly with the Department of Gender and Social Development, where PWD's issues are domiciled, and then the department escalates issues and needs of PWDs to the county assembly, where planning and budgeting happens. And there is an arrow here, which is a top-down approach, which then connects the executive county through the sub-county structures, ward structures, to the grassroots level. And essentially, because resources from the national government flow into the county government, and planning and budgeting is done by the county assembly with the participation of the community members, and therefore services, budgets that are allocated to the different offices at the sub-county level, ward level, are able to reach the PWDs because the disability champions demand and drive the process across the different levels. Maybe you should ask, has this been of any benefit? Yes. During the process, we were able to see that the gaps that we were looking at that needed to be addressed were addressed, because now there are services that are reaching a majority of the PWDs, as we will be able to show you in the next slides. And PWDs have a space. The disability champions, 62 of them have been equipped with skills in communication, lobbying and advocacy, enterprise skills, and all sorts of skills to be able to deal directly with duty bearers and stakeholders. And in terms of accountability of the services provided, this could pass the test of time during COVID-19. Disability champions were able to sit in the task forces and to lobby for foodstuffs, sanitary services, and even access to healthcare. And these inputs that were provided, the foodstuffs, were able to be distributed to the PWDs at the grassroots level through the structures, the county government structures, using the disability champions to reach a large number of PWDs. Sorry. Move to the next. Other benefits, and one of the concerns of the county government was how some disability types, such as this physical, those who are able to move about, were more represented and could be seen, while they had to reach, like the deaf, those with mental health issues, were not being reached. Therefore, now they're able to be reached. They participate at the grassroots group level, and if they cannot come in person, their caregivers come in. Even caregivers, parents of children with disabilities, are participating. And therefore, this whole process has enabled recognition of PWDs and their ability to contribute to development, also improve their well-being. It has also reduced abuses, particularly on women and persons with mental disability, because they are aware that there are disability champions who are following up cases of abuse, and the connecting with the justice system, work directly with the local administration and the justice department. There are cases that are in court, others have been resolved out of court. Women have received back their property, land which had been taken away. And so there are many cases that we can quote that have been resolved. For the sake of time, I think I'm moving pretty fast. And the achievements, yes, we have quantified some achievements here. I'll just touch on a few, and because the presentation will be shared, you can interact in the interactive sessions, will be present to answer. Given the structure and the tests that it has gone through, Meru County was given a recognition award by the National Gender and Equality Commission on 2 occasions. One was to recognize inclusion of PWDs in services and employment. The other award was to recognize inclusion of women, including women with disabilities. We have been able, together with the disability champions, facilitating them to ensure that they are able to get out children who are out of school. For example, this picture shows children who were just locked up in homes with mental illness, learning with their teacher. They have also received education bursaries, and they're able to stay in school without interruption. How has this been made possible? There's been a lot of advocacy and lobbying through joint action, like these disability champions and civil society and rights organization during one of the International Disability Days. We also use, PWDs use the local radios, the vernacular radios, the national radio and TV, and also the social media, which has been a very powerful tool to pass on information and to continue pressing for inclusion. In terms of economic empowerment, this has worked out very well at the group level. Persons with disabilities have been able to access funds from the Women Fund, Youth Enterprise Fund. There's also the disability grants that are provided to enable persons with disabilities to be economically independent. They choose group projects that are suitable for them, such as poultry, rearing, dairy goat keeping. They sell the milk. This group, for example, was doing a water project for where they're able to access water close their homes, and they also sell to the community and use it to irrigate their farms and sell the produce. And individual businesses, there is a circle, I think it was hidden here, a PWD circle, which is funded by the county government, and individual persons with disabilities have been able to access loans. They join as members, they save and access loans to improve their businesses. Others access small loans from their people banking in their local groups to do micro businesses. This lady, for example, was able to expand her shop, diversify her products. She's knitting and she gets orders for school sweaters, which she supplies around her village. What are the lessons? We have learned that when we equip persons with disabilities, even at the grassroots level, they are able to advocate for their needs and they can drive the process and do meaningful participation. Number two, out of the 67 disability champions, 80% of them are women. They have taken up leadership roles. They represent their communities in water project committees, in school committees, and other development projects. Here, there's an important lesson that we'd like to point out. Many times as development practitioners, we blame duty bearers that they are not delivering on their roles. Apparently, we learned that many of them were not even aware of the CRPD. Many also believe that because Department of Gender and Social Development is where PWD's issues are domiciled, they have no role to play. So we are able to actually sensitize them on CRPD. Now they can mainstream PWDs and allow inclusion of PWDs across the kind of services they provide across the board. And I think from the achievements and how PWDs have come out and they're being recognized, we think that this framework has been very provided an effective representation, and it has allowed PWDs to become economically independent, although their businesses were also affected by COVID-19. They are coming up now with support also from different CSOs and the government. But yes, this structure can enable us to allow PWDs to be economically independent. But also one of the other lessons I would like to bring today to all our participants is that it can be replicated because it's embedded in the local administrative government units. It can be replicated in all counties in Kenya, for example, but also in other countries with consideration of the specific country administrative context. And we thought we should share it with you. If you have questions, please engage with us. And this also shows some of the work that disability champions have been able to do. This is a county, sub-county building, hosting government offices. They did not have access to PWDs. They championed for this wheelchair ramp to be built, and it was done. And so PWDs are able to access services. So thank you. I would like to rest my presentation there. And if you want us to discuss more, here are our contacts and we can engage further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you for this great presentation. So, can you stop sharing your screen, please? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, can you
Yes.
please stop your presentation, sharing your screen,
Yes.
so we can see each other? Okay. So now we have up to 15 minutes for discussion. Maybe we will turn on our cameras and ask questions or some remarks or just words of thank you to our great presenters. Please, you're welcome. Victoria, can we start with you? Now Ukraine is always the first.
Thank you. I would like to thank you to all of our speakers today. It was really interesting presentations. And I think we have a lot of things to take from you for our country as experience. Would you have a good experience in this, and we will share this experience with our colleagues. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Julia, some remarks or questions from you?
Yes, thank you so much for your experience. It is very important and interesting. And I have a question for all participants. I hope it will be correctly. What do you think? What are the most important criteria for people with disabilities in employment in your country, in your region, in your experience?
It's a question to Tonio.
Yes.
Maybe you can repeat. What are the?
You mean the criteria for what have you mean about skills or something like this? Ты имеешь в виду навыки или что-то такое у них? Или критерии?
Критерии для них самих какие важны при трудоустройстве?
Okay, if we are I apologize. You see, we have international conference, so some issues with language translations. So if we are talking about a person with disability, what is important for him to know, to understand when he is trying to find a job to be employment?
I think, first of all, it always depends on the type of impairment. So mainly if you have persons with intellectual disability, which in my opinion, it is the most challenging. You have a group of people that are supporting the person to go into employment. You have the family, you have the system, etc. Because obviously they need a little bit more of support. However, when there are persons with disability that are going into employment, in my opinion, I think there is a fear when it comes to divulging, say what their disability is. I think for some, they find it comfortable to say what their disability is. For some, it is visible, because either they are wheelchair users, they are fit, However, when the disability is invisible, so the employer is not seeing the disability, but maybe it is intellectual disability or learning difficulties. Sometimes the employer discovered this later on when they are employed, and then it becomes the challenge, you know although it is their right not to divulge what type of disability they have. However, I think it is only fair that their disability is known to the employer, because I am sure if the employer knows that he could support more the person, he will do it. But sometimes there is fear, that I don't want him to know that, for example, sometimes it can be that the person gets fits, for example, and there is the tendency that it can be dangerous also for the person himself or for the colleagues. So this is quite a challenge when a person with disability, especially with non-visible. And I think it is only fair for the employer to know this. He doesn't have to go and with a board, with a whiteboard. It just needs to be discussed during the initial process when the person is being employed. And that is why it is important, the role of the job coach, for example. So the job coach would facilitate this type of information that is being divulged, So I think it is only fair that they share what the type of disability is, because then there could be a consequences in this. However, still I would say, if there are persons who, for some reason or another, they don't want to, it is their right. However, there should be a compromise, in my opinion, and that helps a lot in the process once they are at the place of work. So these are in my opinion, the most criteria for this sector.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I think it's very important. We have this similar, because for many years, my background is psychology, and for many years, our organization participated in programs of supporting people with mental disabilities. So it's and I wonder, there's so different countries, but so similar challenges. It's absolutely fantastic. It's great to have the opportunity to learn from each other. Brent, can I ask one question to you? You talk about the central role of the local government in these post-pandemic programs. Does this include employing community development practitioners? And if so, do you know how many are employed per head of population now?
So it's not just community development practitioners that we employ, because the business is so varied. We employ everything from technical staff through to custodial staff, administrative staff, you name it, and it's kind of exists in local government. In terms of across Australia, I don't know how many people are employed by local government, but in the Pilbara region, local government is probably the main employer. Probably close. If it's not, then it's very closely tied with mining companies. And the difference being that because mining companies, their work is cyclical, like they'll come, they'll extract minerals and then they'll leave. The working in local government is often like more permanent in nature. So in the region that I live in, local government is probably the primary employer. That's probably not true everywhere, but in a regional community like this, we are number one.
I see. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear participants, if you have any questions but you cannot turn on your camera or microphone, please use chat. No problem. We will read it. We still have 5 minutes to talk to each other. It's great. So may I ask one more question, Tonya, for you? You talk about the type of employment communities should promote for people with disabilities. Are you arguing here for inclusion of disabled people with any business sector, or for the creation of companies that focus upon employing disabled people?
I think the community itself, I think it's a safe space for these job seekers who eventually will go to work, you know, that they can taste a little bit more of what is, you know, even in mainstreams, you know, we have young people finishing schools and then they will go into employment. And I am sure that, you know, from school to employment, they will have a shock. You know, normally because the world of employment is much different from school. So we can use the community by supporting, you know, if we know of any young people, of any young person who is looking for employment, and if we have, you know, youth clubs, etc., and we know that maybe we can give a little bit of, they usually are called job tasters, you know, they taste the real world, you know. It's like if we have people from the community that can give them this opportunity, then when they go actually to the work of place, maybe outside our community, you know, or maybe in larger companies, they would have a little bit of an extra experience, you know, not just put in there and, you know, but I always insist, this type of job tasters, there is a beginning and an end, you know, because then sometimes you have, maybe maybe they do it unintentionally, but if this job taster becomes, you know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, then I think there is abuse, you know, because the person is not being paid. But I think if there is some, okay, we can go there for 4 weeks, you know, even those 4 weeks can be put down in the CV of the person, you know, but not so long, because then I think there would be an abuse, you know, because the person would be doing work without being paid. But for some time, yes, and that time can be recorded in the CV of the person, you know?
Yeah, I see. Thank you very much. I got it. Okay, Elise, are you still with us? Can I ask you one more question? Can you hear me? Elizabeth, are you with us? Elizabeth from Kenya? Oh, I think no. She left us.
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Oh, I can hear you. So nice. Can I ask you just one question?
Yes, please.
Thank you for presenting this great project. I have been in Kenya last year because the World Community World Conference 2021 was held in Kenya. It was also virtual, but we provided a tech support, so I was invited. And I saw a lot of details which you are talking about. Tell me, please, how much did this project cost? And is there evidence that this approach is being more widely adopted across Kenya? What do you think?
Yes. Let me first of all answer about whether there's evidence this approach is in use. Yes, it is in use. Even right now, as I sit, I'm able to see from the PWD's engagement with the county government. In actual sense, right now, what is going on is fighting for a political space for representation in the National County Assembly, because we just did our elections. That has gone on very well, and they're disseminating information. The county government actually validated the system, and it is now the approved system where all CSOs, rights organizations, plug in to the county to avoid duplication of effort. And it also helps them to access data bottom up and top down. So it is in place, and it's possible to contact even the disability champions and know the kind of, if you visit Kenya, for example, Meru County, even it's possible to be able to see what is happening there. And now it has enabled the PWDs take action themselves and keep their voices being heard. They are no longer left behind in what is happening in the county. And also many other counties have come to the Meru County to do exchange learning. This is on record in the county. And we also facilitated some, during the project, we also facilitated other counties to come and learn, including the Machakos County, where there's a different structure. But what I would like to point out is that it also depends a lot on the political will, because the county government knew there was a problem and they needed to resolve it, because there were different, very fragmented PWDs groups, but also different, one disability type had multiple representation. And therefore that was creating a lot of tension and conflict between duty bearers and the PWDs. So they had a problem that needed to be solved. And that problem is common also in other counties. And I want to believe also in other countries, because when people feel that the issues are not being addressed, everybody feels they have a right to demand for those rights. So yes, yeah, it is evident, and it's going on even beyond the project. In terms of, let me just confirm, I will confirm and I'll do you an email, I think. How can I get post to you? I think I'll be able to access. I can communicate with Julia.
Yeah, please. Yeah, because we will have so many participants from Kenya and so many partners who is interested in such projects. It would be really useful for us. Thank you very much. It always so difficult to stop the discussion and to stop the meeting. But nevertheless, thank you very much for all of you for your contribution for this conference and for this session as well. I hope that we will have more opportunities to meet each other, not only during this conference, but during the whole year. We will have Inclusive Practices Virtual Space active. We launched it yesterday, so now it's active, and we will have meetings, discussions, workshops also there, and we would like to invite you to join us there. So please join us. Thank you very much. Keep safe and well, and see you. Thank you very, very much. See you later. Looking forward to next.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Liz. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.